Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here with Jamie Lyons, and we're going to be talking about vibe coding for recruiters, effectively. But Jamie, first of all, give us a quick introduction to you and your background.
Good, nice one. Yeah. So I currently work at a company called First, where we're focused on like application management for recruiters. But previous to that, I was a recruiter myself, recruited for about 8 years across internal agency, and company called Hacker Job that a lot of tech recruiters will know. And yeah, primarily focused on tech recruitment, but always been drawn to like the operational side of it and improving processes. And then yeah, I guess when vibe coding came about, I naturally kind of jumped on top of that, and now I've been helping recruiters actually take their first steps vibe coding and just giving them a little bit more confidence around AI and how they can get started.
Okay, so I mean, I'm 49 and I've been working in recruitment since 1999, and I've never seen anything like AI and its impact on recruiting and what can be done. Even like, the invent of job boards and the invent of
Yeah.
LinkedIn and stuff like that. It's not had none of that had the same impact that AI can have. You're working for an AI technology business. I've been building an AI technology business in the recruiting space, and I am consistently amazed by what can be accomplished, um, not just by the companies that are providing technology in our space, but what individuals can go and do themselves as well. So, you've been doing a lot of training with recruiters around like the different steps that they can go through to go from not much knowledge through to they're like
Yeah.
building their own stuff. Tell us about this kind of maturity journey that people can go on.
Yeah, I guess the first level of maturity, I think the majority of people are kind of there at the moment. It's just having a chat interface like on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever LLM they're using. And you would just be like copy and pasting messages in there and like maybe fine tuning emails, fine tuning outreach, or maybe in your personal life, you'd be using it to like I don't know, generate a recipe for you to cook at home, like very like high level simple stuff where you're just interacting with the chat interface. Um, and I guess that is level one. I do feel like the majority of people are there. I think then
Let's just dwell on that for a
people,
second.
yeah,
Let's just
go
let's
on.
just dwell on that for a second. I use it probably 10 times a day for things
Mhm.
like travel planning
Yeah,
and like understanding subjects more. My favorite hack around that is if I really want to understand some aspect of, I don't know, astronomy or something I don't know anything
hmm,
about, right? And I'm reading something or watching a video or whatever, and I'm like, I can't follow this at all. I'll just go in and I'll say, explain this so that a 12-year-old would understand it and in no
yeah,
more than 3 or 4 sentences. And then
hmm,
you go, okay, so that's the start of the building block. And then I'll go, okay,
yeah,
now ramp it up so a 15-year-old would understand it. Okay. And then
yeah,
that's kind of what I do. And it really has um, changed my ability to learn. And my wife said to me
hmm,
yesterday, she's she I don't think she's the most patient human in the world, and I think that's okay for me to say it because nobody here is going to know who she is. But um, she uses it very regularly to go, why is this irritating me? And because her chat GPT understands her so well,
yeah,
it knows everything about her background and her neurodiversities and whatever, and it's like
yeah,
explains it, and she goes, all right, fine, I should pipe down then.
yeah.
Anyway, unbelievable opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of going from like the first stage of maturity to like getting a little bit towards the second stage of maturity. 'Cause I think the first stage is literally just using a chat interface, whereas the second stage is when it's got like a lot of context about you. Maybe you've put in some specific instructions, and it's still just using the chat interface, but it's also tapping into a wider context that it didn't previously have. So even though you're only using the chat interface, it's like a lot more personalized and a lot more specific to you. So you are still getting a little bit more value out of it. You can either engineer that yourself through literally putting instructions into the settings of like your chat GPT or whatever to make it talk in a certain way or submit some information about you, or just from using it over time, it will just naturally learn more and more by using it.
So just in terms of the best way to get started with that, I mean, you could just ask it, like, what is the best way
Yeah,
for me to get you to continuously understand my context?
yeah,
And it'll just tell you which
exactly.
buttons to press.
I actually think that's the best thing you can do with AI at the moment. Like whenever I get stuck, and I get stuck all the time when I'm vibe coding and building stuff, my first port of call is like always just ask Claude, and Claude literally gets me out of the sticky situation. pretty much 10 out of 10 times, it might say like, give me 5 steps, and they'll look a bit confusing. And I'll be like, all right, cool, let's slow down. Just give me one step at a time and let's work through these together. But yeah, I mean, going to AI is literally my number one point of action when I'm stuck on stuff at this point.
Just one other thing that I do actually, I've just remembered quite a lot is if I'm in something like HubSpot, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't know how to make a particular thing happen.
Yeah,
I just say, I want to achieve this. This is, and I screenshot the screen I'm in, I paste it in and I go, what do I
yeah,
click? And it says, click this. I then say, now what do I screenshot it back in? Now what do I click? And I mean, I'm terrible with instructions. Just can't read them for some reason. My brain won't allow me to read very well. So I find like getting around how to use a particular application just
yeah,
by screenshotting what I'm on and saying, what do I do now, is a brilliant thing to do.
exactly. Screenshots are a superpower as well, especially because like, for example, with HubSpot, there'll be different versions of HubSpot that people might be using. So settings might be in different place and that type of stuff. And it will just pick a random version and say, this is how you go and do it. Whereas if you show a screenshot, it can reference maybe the version that you're on and exactly where you need to click on that screen you're looking at. So screenshots are definitely a really, really strong tool.
So what's level 3 then?
I would say level three is still within the chat interface, but you're actually adding connectors into your system. So, for example, you might be integrating with a lot of teams will be using like a Notion or a Granola or a Slack or like whatever tech stack you're using within your ecosystem. You can go into, for example, I use Claude. It's called connectors in Claude. And you can basically just go in, click on the different tech stack that you're using, input your details, and just integrate them up nice and quickly. Um, and then the real value of that is again, it's just around this context engineering. If it's connected to your Slack, it can read all your Slack messages. If it's connected to your Notion, it can read your brand guidelines and all this other stuff that's important to your brand. So, like when you're interacting with your specific chat interface, it just really knows a lot about who you are, what your company is, what you're trying to achieve, and it just helps make sure that the responses are way more tailored, and just way more useful in general. Yeah, I'd say that's probably level three, like getting connected up to your tech stack.
So I'm starting to think about information security here, and I'm starting to think
Yeah,
about like for multinational
yeah,
corporations, they're probably going to find it difficult to allow you to connect some of these tools together. They've probably got internal systems that already
yeah.
have that type of some of that capability. I'm thinking of Copilot in particular,
Yeah.
which it's already a Microsoft product, so it's kind of built
Hmm.
within the suite and it can get some information. But unfortunately, I find Copilot to be very, very limited in comparison to some of
Yeah.
the others.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it's definitely not a one size fits all. Like you can only in a proper professional work environment, you can only go as far as your employer will let you go. You definitely shouldn't go connecting up random systems to your AI like without permission from your employer and that type of stuff because that'll be a complete headache. But what I will say is like if you are really interested in the way that the world is heading towards in this AI enabled future, don't let that be a blocker to your development because you can still do this stuff in personal projects at like pretty much zero cost at this point. So you can still pick up these skills and maybe move on to another workplace where they are enabling their recruiters in this way or teaching people to work in this way. So even though like you do definitely have to take into like strong consideration what your employer's risk tolerance is and get approvals to do anything, don't look at it as like I work at a company that won't let me do anything. So that's just my story. Like, don't be afraid to take it into your own hands to have a bit of fun.
I mean, I can't agree more with that. So Stephen, who works with me in poetry, he's built a whole variety of different things. He's not an engineer, but he's gone and just trained himself how to write code, and he built an ADHD app,
Yeah.
which he's got partners who are going and like actually commercializing that now. He also
Hmm.
built he also built like a kind of marketplace for recruitment technology tools so that you can go
Hmm.
in and go and find the tools that you want. He's not done that for any commercial gain,
Exactly.
but he's just gone and trained himself.
Exactly. And they're great examples of how you can pick up these skills without needing to stress about like GDPR and like personal information because it's just like it's all on the web, right? Company details and all that type of stuff that he's dealing with. Obviously, when you do start dealing with candidate and personal data, you do need to start looking up regulations and GDPRs and how you're processing that data and who's controlling it, etc. But for learning, like just don't pick projects that involve personal data, and you can kind of have a lot more experiment and a lot more fun just learning.
Great. So what about when I want to get more sophisticated? What's next?
This is probably one of the biggest jumps, I'd say, like, because all of that stuff's just within the chat interface. The next one is when you're actually downloading stuff onto your desktop. So if we get really specific about just a Claude example, because that's the tool that I use. So you have Claude in the web, which can't action anything on your computer, but then you can get Claude on the desktop as an app, which then can start actioning stuff on your computer. And then from the Spider-Man movie, with great power comes great responsibility. It's great because when you got more power, you can do more stuff. But at the same time, when there is more stuff can go wrong. So like for example, it can install stuff, it can delete files, it can create files, it can install software, like whatever you need it to do, it can usually action it on your computer, which is really beneficial because it can remove a lot of the technical barrier when like dealing with different frameworks within different coding languages and this type of stuff. Claude can basically go and install all those packages and do all the scary technical stuff on the back end. But equally, because it has that power, you need to be really careful with what you're hitting approve on, because you don't want to install malware, you don't want to delete all your photos of your childhood or like whatever it is. You just need to be a lot more careful with how you're interacting with these tools, and be a lot more mindful of like when Claude is asking for you to approve an action, like what are you actually approving and giving Claude access to?
What's the jump in productivity when I do this though?
I mean, it would really depend on the task you're doing, but if we look at it from like a vibe coding perspective, like just building websites and interfaces in Claude Chat, you'd have to build the code in Claude Chat. Once you're happy with where the visual, like the way that the code's looking, the way that the website's looking, you download that code. You could upload it to example for GitHub. Then once it's in GitHub, you go into Vercel, connect up your GitHub and Vercel, and then you would basically pull that code into Vercel and host it as a website. And every time you make a change, you would need to go through that process again, deal with it in Claude Chat, go to GitHub, upload it, go to Vercel. To be fair, Vercel would be automated at that point, but it's still like a lot more of a laborious admin process. Um, Whereas with Claude Code, like if your systems are all connected up, you can literally do it all in Claude Code, and I could just say, go and get me a Vercel link for this page that we just built, and it would automatically upload it to GitHub, automatically upload it, host it to Vercel, and like it would just send me back the link that's been completed. And like anytime I want to make changes, it would just do that all automatically as well. So from that point of view, there's like a big productivity increase. But also in just like a tech setup, like for example, uploading a HTML file to GitHub is super easy. Whereas you start to get involved with all these other different languages and you have to go through a little bit more of a technical process to get it out there. So even just learning that process of getting like a JavaScript file into GitHub for like a technical person, it's like a no-brainer, it's super easy for them. But for like an average recruiter, even just learning that would be an intimidating step that would like scare them away from doing it. So like there's almost like a secret productivity that like just by taking that step out, you end up going so much further naturally, just because like it takes so many blockers out of the way. So it's really hard to like say exactly how much productivity you get out of it, but it's more so just like the unlock of like flexibility and like freedom and like experimentation.
I mean, it feels like you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of what you're talking about there, for those people that want to take those steps,
Yeah.
they're going to be following what you're saying here, and they're going to be like,
Yeah.
okay, that sounds good. I know what to do. And
Hmm.
then for other people who they're not interested in building their own types of stuff,
Hmm.
they're not going to inadvertently download those things that you're saying and get them connected
Yeah.
to each other and whatever. So they're not going to find themselves on that desert island. Let's talk about like what are some of the cool things that you've seen recruiters actually go and just you know build on their own.
Yeah. So the coolest stuff that I've seen, I mean, I've seen an ATS being built and like where it's like a super custom ATS for like a small startup. They're able to just customize it like exactly how they want their ATS to look and exactly how they want it to function. Granted, this guy was like fairly strong user of AI and he kind of knew what he was doing and how to navigate that process. But I mean, like if you say a couple of years ago, someone built their own ATS like a recruiter, you'd just say like, what a stupid idea, that doesn't even make sense. But now it's a conversation that's being had. Um, and then I guess on the other side of like nothing to do with even vibe coding, more of like a productivity focused increase. Um, I was at an Ashby event a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually talking about vibe coding, but there was another guy there called Jake Teagle, from V7, and he had built some automations using something called Claude Skills, which is like for the viewers, like pretty much in this context, it's just giving very specific instructions to Claude so it can like repeat a process to a consistent standard in a consistent structure. And what he had done is connected up his like Slack, his all hands meetings, and his granola meetings. And off the back of like a hiring manager intake meeting, he would just say to Claude, I need you to go and create the hiring playbook for the engineer that I just spoke to Adam about. And then off the back of that, he would go and create his job description, his interview notes, and like all this other stuff. Um, and it would save him like a lot of time in building these documents himself. And like the way he'd set it up, it was very granular, very specific in how these documents needed to be structured and what needed to be inside of these documents. And yeah, I mean, that would have taken him hours previously to build a job description, build the interview questions, all this other stuff. Um, and yeah, now it's just one prompt for him. So there's so many cool use cases out there, and it's just having the power to build whatever makes sense for you is the superpower, I think.
That's amazing. Jamie, thanks very much for taking some time with me today to talk about this. I found it really interesting. And we're going to talk again in a few days about first, I want to find out a little bit more about the product and how that all works. And I'll see you soon.
Okay, cheers, Adam. Appreciate it.